on as a panel. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. If you could just let us know where you're joining from in the chat, and then we'll get the chat going. While I am trying to get my co-host in as a panelist. Yeah. Hold on. Okay, we'll just give it a couple minutes and yeah, drop in the chat where you're coming in from. And I am coming in from LA as well as Armando.
I've got New Jersey here, representing the other side of the coast.
Looks like Jeremy's in.
Oh, is he in there? Okay, I didn't see him. There he is.
Wow, we've got Oklahoma, Illinois.
Oklahoma. I moved here from Oklahoma. So.
Yeah.
Rhode Island,
Jeremy's
Jacksonville.
here.
Hello, hello.
Hi,
Hey,
sorry
Jeremy.
about that. I am sure
No apologies
my
needed.
fault.
It's all good.
All right. So if you guys have joined us before, we typically are co-hosted between myself, Kristen Messerly, and Robbie Chrisman. And today we have a special guest co-host, Jeremy Potter, taking the place of Robbie today. So Jeremy, thanks so much for joining.
Great to be here.
And today we are, really excited about this episode. This is Mortgages with Millennials, and we are, of course, our goal is to talk about how to better reach millennials. We are sponsored here today by Form Free. So before I get into the contents and our guests here, I'll share a little bit about Form Free. Form Free believes in a financial system that serves everyone. Form Free's Passport Wallet, available now in the Apple App Store, and Google Pay, is designed to make it easier than ever for consumers to understand their ability to pay and match with lenders. So this week we are joined with guests Pinky Shah and Armando Novello. Armando and Pinky are incredible people, incredible loan officers, and they are both ambassadors of First Home IQ. So super excited for you guys to join us. Thanks so much, Pinky and Armando.
Thank you. We're excited to be here.
Since we are newly co-hosting, Jeremy, you've been on as a guest before talking about mortgages with millennials, but I wanted to start and have you just share a little bit about your experience in the industry and a little bit of background.
Yeah, I mean, I have a sort of interesting, some might call it windy career path because I got into the industry when the Dodd-Frank Act happened. I was an attorney, still am an attorney, but I don't practice very much that often. And I was helping mortgage companies in particular understand the regulation and the leadership of the CFPB and the amendments that rolled out. So if you remember, there was sort of an orderly process. It was LO comp, and then we went through all the different disclosure and data related updates and amendments all the way through HMDA. And that gave me a really good understanding of the business, meaning I had to spend time with sales. I had to spend time with capital markets. I had to spend time with underwriting operations. I had to understand, we all did, what the compliance implications were for technology for our organizations. And once Dodd-Frank, I like to describe it as it became more of an operations and maintenance role rather than a new thing for the industry. I moved into the capital markets at Rocket Mortgage. I had been legal counsel at Rocket when it launched 2016, but in the capital markets, I was able to work on product development and housing policy. What are we doing with the actual mortgage, the financing, the way we engage with consumers? And that gave me kind of that big picture understanding of where the levers are, what can we change, what can we not change, working closely with the GSEs, other big banks, policymakers in DC. And it really sharpened my passion for how we think about housing big picture. You know, I was involved in a call that the Mortgage Bankers Association put together, and we were hearing from the CEO of the Atlanta Fed, Dr. Raphael Bostic. And this is roughly around 2020. And his comment to us was, if I was you guys, if I was in mortgage, I would actually think about this as everyone well housed. Because when you have a healthy housing ecosystem and you have people moving from renting to home ownership, different types of home ownership, downsizing, increasing their household formation with a bigger home, when all of that is happening and healthy, everybody is doing better. Everyone well housed is a really positive thing for the mortgage industry. And so when we talk about it, Kristen, you and I, it ranges from digital experience and transparency to the actual structure of the financing itself. What are you putting down? What does that risk profile look like? How does it treat you as a consumer, and how does it treat lenders and investors over 7, 10, and 30 years? And so my role now has been to help companies, particularly tech startups and technology growth companies, understand how to get into this industry. It is very difficult as a startup or as a small company to be heard, to make a difference, to find a big client and not be consumed by them, or to reach out to Fannie and Freddie with a new idea or a new technology. And so for the past few years, kind of matured that thought process into more of an advising and consulting role with different companies all across real estate, mortgage, and title. And so one of the things I still care deeply about is how to help people achieve their goal. And I think home ownership, as much as we talk about it as a generational wealth creator, which it obviously is, I think we undersell it as an economic stimulus to communities. I think we talk a lot about individuals and we don't talk enough about what home ownership does for a place and a city and a community and the people who choose to live in that community and why. And so that's kind of been my biggest passion point lately. And then also, I hope we talk about this today, but increasingly, Kristen and I are talking about how this is not one industry mortgage, one industry title, one industry real estate. We like to pretend like mortgage is over here, title's over here, and real estate's over here, and we have 3 separate industries when everybody else in the world sees it as one thing. It's a home buying process, it's a home financing process. We're the ones under the hood treating it like we're separate. And I don't think we should anymore. I think it's actually done us a disservice, particularly on the mortgage side. And so that's kind of where you find me today.
That's awesome. Yeah, and a good segue into talking about that. I feel like, with Pinky and Armando being very focused on the first-time home buyer, you really have to be very much at the forefront of talking about, like, looking at things holistically anyway. And the home buyer themselves, especially coming into it as, not having that kind of experience, they are not thinking about things in a kind of segmented type of way. So Pinky and Armando, I'd love for you guys to share a little bit about your, origin story, how you got into the industry, but really, like, what is your passion around reaching first-time home buyers? So Pinky, let's start with you.
Well, I don't think anyone, Jeremy, had a straight path for the most part, right? We've all had our windy road into this field, because most of us don't grow up saying this is what I want to be when I grow up. So my path started in pharmacy school. So I have a doctorate in pharmacy, which is where I went because it seemed like it was the smart thing to do at the time. So I went and completed that degree, worked at Johnson & Johnson for the beginning part of my career. And then back in 2004, one of the best blessings in my life, my daughter Anya was born. And so as she was born, it was a sign, right? As I think if there's any women watching on here that are mothers, you go through this phase where you start trying to figure out your priorities in life. And obviously being a mother is one of the best privileges that I've had. And so needed to readjust what I wanted to do and how I wanted to handle work and family. I was fortunate. My father happened to own a mortgage brokerage. So he said to me, why don't you come work with me, when I was talking about trying to figure out how to manage both. So I was super, super lucky because Johnson & Johnson let me stay on part-time with them. And my dad let me, and this was back, before Dodd-Frank. So all I needed was a mortgage solicitor license. So a barrier of entry was minimal. You wrote a check for $50 to the Department of Banking and all of a sudden you could sell mortgages, right? It was that easy. So I started, just talking to people about, hey, I joined my dad's business. So that's how I got started in the mortgage business. And I did it very casually until both my children were in school part-time, and full-time, which I realized that I wasn't made for part-time anything. So it was time to make a decision. And I decided that it was the fulfillment that I got from helping families achieve this goal at an individual level was just so much greater for me. And that's what I was really meant to do. So I transitioned over and joined the mortgage world full-time back in, I think it was 2014 at this point. And then, you know, as you're discovering yourself in the mortgage space, you figure out what you like, what you don't like, you go through patterns of it. And again, it became clear to me that because of my focus on education for myself as I was growing up, that I loved educating. And as a little aside, I always wanted to be a teacher before I went to pharmacy school. Dad thought it was a smart thing to go into pharmacy school, so that's why I ended up there. But my passion was always for teaching. So I've always loved education. And I wanted to bring that to people that I was serving. And so that's why first-time home buyers are a great place for me to be, because I care about nurturing them. I want to help them understand. And I realize there's so much information out there and it can be so confusing. And, you know, and everybody, we have so many well-intentioned family and friends, all of us, right? Many of us, and they give us guidance based on their one experience, maybe their two experiences, and that may not be the experience that we have right now. So I focus on trying to help home buyers and first-time home buyers, especially through that process. And so that's where I found that that's my happy spot of where I like to serve, is really focusing on the folks. And as I get older, I take on a little bit more of a motherly approach to them, or a big sister, a big aunt, however, right? And I treat them as if they're my own and want to really make sure that they're set up for success. And Jeremy, you said it, I think the generational wealth opportunity is just so massive that my ability to impact people who haven't had homeownership in their family yet, like I can change the trajectory of their lives by teaching them how to do this, and then the future generations to come. And that just gets me so excited. And that's why I love First Home IQ so much, because and then as Jeremy said, we don't just impact that family, we impact everyone around them and then the community. And it's just a huge ripple effect that we get to be a part of by just doing a mortgage. So that's me.
I love it. What about you, Armando?
Yeah, very cool. So I actually started doing this during college, kind of by accident. I went to UCLA and I got a job right down the street from the campus working for a mortgage broker. And I kind of fell in love. But I think for me, most of it was just my upbringing. Like we moved around a lot. It was always like 6 months and we moved, and then 6 months and we moved. And I was always behind in school. I never really made long-term friends. But one of the things that like really stayed with me as a kid is when my mom bought her first house, that was the very first time we had any sort of stability, right? I went to the same high school for 4 years. Like for the first time, I thought, I'm not that dumb, right? I was able to catch up on the curriculum and it worked out really well for me. So when I started doing this, I always thought like, this is my opportunity to give people the stability that home ownership gave us. And I think that's why I'm so focused on the first time buyer and why the first home IQ is such a big deal for me, because I get to continue what I've been doing for the last 5 years, but I'm going to level up a little bit with your help. So I'm excited.
I love that. And yeah, before we get into talking about specific strategies around how you're reaching first-time home buyers, and I guess this is also related, I did want to have you guys share just for a quick minute why you're passionate about First Home IQ. Pinky, you've been doing this for a while. You're one of our top donors this last month and have been really active as a volunteer. And Armando is new to the program, but definitely hitting the ground running. So Pinky, what made you, interested in First Home IQ and passionate about that?
So I love giving in general. Like that's what drives me to show up to work every day, is obviously the impact I make on the families, but then my ability and my obligation to give back. So part of what we do is we give back to a local hospital for every loan that we close. And so and I always wanted to do something that was closer or at least aligned to the line of work that I'm in. And so when First Home IQ, and I was searching for things. And then when Dave and Todd, formed First Home IQ, it was what I dreamt of. And if I had invested the time, would have, loved to have created. So it was just, because between that combined with, as I told you, my interest in education, it was just the absolute perfect place for me to be able to help. And I've been really fortunate, Armando, I had a little bit of a different upbringing in that we grew up owning we were immigrants coming to the US, but after we rented for a little while. And we moved around a lot at the beginning as we were getting settled. But I think since I was maybe 10 or 11, my parents bought a home. And I grew up with homeownership just being what you do. And so I've never rented a day in my life, except for when I was in college apartments. I've owned from the beginning because that's the way that my dad taught me to do things. So, and then as I got into this business, I realized that that's not how everybody was brought up and that's not normal. And so I came to realize that the people that didn't have the upbringing that I had need someone like us to help them show that there's a path that way. And so that's why I think first home IQ is so important, because it's not something that everyone has the ability to do or have that support system at home. And if we can be that support system for them, again, we can change the course of their lives and again their future generations.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
No, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, for those who don't know, First Home IQ is focused on bringing financial literacy to the next generation. So Pinky helped volunteer on our first curriculum rollout with a high school in Brooklyn. And we're really, getting things moving around partnerships with Big Brothers Big Sisters. And Armando has a ton of great ideas to bring this to his community. So before we get into strategies, Armando, what was your passion around getting involved?
Yeah, well, I've been doing these first-time buyer programs or workshops for about a year and a half. But what we've also done is we incorporate our VIPs. Our VIPs are like financial planners, CPAs, 1031 exchange experts. So we bring them and do a workshop for our past clients once a quarter, just to try to get people out of debt, right? Like we put them in these big mortgages and now they're in debt. So we try to give them the tools and everything that they need in order to be in a better financial place. So when I heard about First Home IQ, I think it was Joe Soto who told me about it, and he introduced us. And I just thought, this is great. Like now there's curriculum. I've been making it up as I go along or asking people to help me. So just being able to plug that in and again, just level it up, reach more people and be able to get into some of the schools that really need it, I think is just awesome.
So,
yeah, that sounds great. I mean, one of the things that, when I studied and saw some research on the racial homeownership gap in particular, going back again to that 2020, 2021 timeframe, I think one of the things that Freddie Mac found, Pinky, to your point, was that one of the biggest determinations of desire to own a home for first-time home buyers in particular was whether your parents owned a home or not. If you had that knowledge or had that experience, it was transformational in terms of your sentiment and your knowledge about mortgages or your knowledge about home ownership. And I'm curious because one of the things that we talked about, and it's already coming out in our conversation here, is being an advisor to everyone, but particularly to first-time home buyers. And Armando, it sounded to me like you were talking about advising even beyond closing, right? I'm going to advise from renting to home ownership throughout the mortgage process, and then even beyond that. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach that role? Was that natural? Was that just kind of who you are, or was there something more that you're hearing from people, the insights you're using? Can you talk a little bit about thinking of it as an advisory role rather than say mortgage loan officer? Nothing wrong with that, but just that's a different phrase than sort of mortgage advisor, or the way you just described how you think about your role.
I think there's so many people who need it, and no one really teaches us this stuff, right? So many people are lost, and even myself, like growing up, we didn't talk about money or finances, and whenever we did, it was kind of tense. No one was really excited about it. It was always from a scarcity standpoint. So being able to kind of get past that a little bit and then be able to teach others, I think that's really the key, right? Not just us getting out, but helping others kind of get out is kind of been my goal. And if I don't know something, then I try to bring an expert who will do it, right? And I mean, from a selfish standpoint, I know there's a lot of loan officers on here. When you bring like a living trust lawyer to do a class for 30 or 40 of your past clients, and then that lawyer signs up 15 or 20 people for a living trust, like there's loyalty there, right? Like that lawyer who did that for us, I think we closed 7 transactions that he sent over to us just in 12 months, and some of them were buyers, some of them were sellers that we were able to give away to agents. So selfishly, it kind of works full circle because they're sending business, but really what I want to do is give value to the clients, give value to the partner, and then ultimately it all works out for me, right?
And you're both mortgage coach users, and I know that's, a part of your process in terms of, bringing advice to the transaction as well. Pinky, I know talking about advice is something that's important to you, and I think you'd even brought up before our conversation about like we want to move away from saying loan officer and talk more about mortgage advisor. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I would echo what Armando just said. I think it's all of that I agree with 120%. And to carry forward on what you said, and Jeremy, what you asked about how do we serve them in making those decisions? And I think our responsibility is to help buyers, whether they're first time or not, make informed, educated decisions. We can't expect them to have all the answers themselves. And I like to say to people, if you want an order taker, that's not what I am. I'm here to help guide you through the process. So you don't have to come to me and tell me that I want an FHA loan, right? That's not your job. Your job is to say, this is the problem that I'm trying to solve. This is what I have. These are the parts of my equation. And then it's my responsibility to help guide you into the right decision. Because if you come to me and tell me you want an FHA loan, there's a good chance that's not the right loan for you, number one. And number two, if you look at the statistics, right, they say 44% of first-time home buyers end up regretting their decision within 2 to 3 years. And I always say no one that works with a loan advisor should be in that position, because we've taken the time to get to know them up front and help them plan properly so they don't end up in that situation. And then moving forward into what happens after they buy a home, right? Part of the reason that some people don't buy homes is because they're not just scared of the process of buying, but of what happens when I own the home. Like, so there's that fear of I'm going to be left alone after I buy this home and I don't have any resources to help me figure it out afterwards. And so Jeremy and Armando, that's what you talked about. It's like, how do we serve them afterwards? They don't know that they should make sure that they have an estate plan and that their home is protected or that they have life insurance. And that's our job. And as advisors, we help them do those things. And we do annual financial reviews for our clients. That's one of the ways that we serve them. We give them a home concierge service. We give them, home digest. We give them all these resources, perfect mortgage promise, all these things so that we can guide them and help them plan ahead. And I just had a first-time home buyer email me today, and it was the best, right? Because he said, I saw one of your videos about investment properties, and he bought his first home. I don't know, I think it's probably been 2 years now. And he said, I like that idea. And that's great, because now we're going to have a conversation. He's like, can you tell me more about it? So we're going to have that conversation. We sparked the idea of more wealth generation for him. So for him, it's a beautiful thing. And Armando, as you said, for us as business owners, right, it's a great thing for us to continue to bring in additional revenue into our business in a way that puts the client's needs first always. So it's just a wonderful way to keep adding value. And I always say to them, I'm here to keep adding value to your life, even after you buy your home. And sometimes they'll say, well, what does it cost me? I said, really, there's two things. The first question is, what does it cost you not to have me on your team, right? Your financial team. And then secondly, why do I do it? Because they're like, well, why do you do it? And I said, I do it because one, it just benefits me to make you a raving fan, selfishly, right? If you're a raving fan, you're going to want to go tell people about me so that I don't have to spend my time advertising and doing all the other stuff. So if I can invest in you more and you become happier and happier and wealthier, then you're my sales force. So I just tell clients that, and they're like, okay, that makes sense to me. So yeah.
You both do so much around like branding yourselves as community leaders, like you're both really active and do incredible videos on social media. Encourage everybody to follow them on Instagram, that spark that inspiration. And you've talked a lot about branding yourself as an advisor. You're coming at it as a community leader, looking at the holistic, process and experience for a buyer. And Armando, you touched on events specifically. And I think for anybody who's in the chat, feel free to jump in with questions. But, for most of the people are looking for ways that they can generate business in today's market. And I think, Armando, you've done an amazing job with events. So could you speak to a little bit more? You touched on doing some workshops as well as partner events. Could you speak to what you're doing around that and how that's working for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the events personally in my business. So we do 2 big events for real estate agents. We just had one last week where we have about 100 agents that come in. Do you want me to go into like how that's set up or what specifically?
I think that would be helpful. Jeremy, what do you think, to make it really practical for the audience?
Absolutely.
If you could walk
I'd
through.
love to hear about it too, Armando.
Yeah, perfect.
Sure. All right. So we do twice a year. What we try to do is we bring panelists. So we typically try to find 3 or 4 real estate agents in the community. Number one, that have a big following, but also that are doing something big right now, right? Like there's a guy that is local here, does home tours on social media, and he's got a ton of business. There's another guy who's just got a massive team. Their team closed about 60 units last month. So I try to bring people like that will share ideas and tactics that are relevant today. So the guy that does a lot of units, he's been doing a buyer broker agreement for the past 8 years where he has the commission built into that. So what a better thing to talk about right now while everybody's kind of nervous about it than to bring someone who's doing that. So we try to bring people that are doing something big and doing it well, that are willing to share. And then from there, we just start to invite. And the events for me are great because they give us an excuse to call people. And I'm not really a coffee guy where I want to take everyone to coffee all the time. So when I call and say, hey, we're hosting this event and these are the speakers that we have, can I get you a free ticket? It's number one, an opportunity to call new agents that I don't know, but it also lets me call the whale agents, right? In this last event, we had maybe 8 or 9 people in the room who will make over $1 million selling real estate in our market. So those are the people that I kind of want to hang out with. And having those events kind of opens the door to where we can have that conversation. Some of them could be future panelists. So now we call them, as opposed to trying to get business from them, say, hey, I want you to come to my event so you can see how we run it. And we want to talk to you about being a future panelist. So we're able to get those. We build relationships with them. And the events, they're a lot of fun, but they're a lot of work. Right. So after last week on Wednesday, it was like, I don't want to talk about events for like the next 6 months again, because it's just so much work. But we get really good results, and we try to make them to where people can leave the event with tactics that they can implement immediately. And I think that's why a lot of them keep coming back, because they know it's not like a rah-rah session where, the next day you forget everything and you're back to doing the same things, if you will. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and you said you got like 70 to 80 of those partners in a room. Is that right? Or is that your first-time homebuyer workshops?
The first-time buyer workshops are a little bit smaller. The realtor events, we usually anywhere from 80 to 120. I think we had 102 last week once we counted everything.
So how are you getting people? Is it just from phone calls that you're getting people to come to the event?
We try to go really wide. So the first thing we do is we send an email. So one thing for loan officers, like every real estate agent that I come across goes into my CRM, whether I meet them at an open house or we write an offer and they don't accept it. So right now in my system, I have about 6,800 real estate agents that are all here in the market. The first thing I do is I send an email that goes out to all 6,000 of them, or whatever number it is. Those who click on anything on the email will usually get a text message through Reach. And those who don't respond to the text message but are active will get a phone call. So that way, with that first email, we might sign up maybe 15 or 20 of them. The text message will get us another 10, and then we make the phone calls to fill the room, right? But I try to do it so that we can leverage all the technology.
Perfect. That's so helpful. Thanks for sharing your process.
Yeah, anytime.
One of the things I like to think about, particularly in the kind of first-time homebuyer renter to homeowner space, is the way in which both of you have described this constantly changing network of business partners, referral sources that work together, right? And on one particular customer, it's a different combination of real estate agent, your shop, and title company. And then the next customer, it's a different combination, but you have this kind of like constantly moving network. You mentioned a little bit about technology helping you. Can you just talk about how you approach the management of that? Because to me, it always feels like in your world, there is an unlimited number of things you could be doing all the time to benefit your business and benefit your customers. And you've got new customers, you have customers in process. You've both talked about being lifelong advisors to past customers. Do you have any insights for us and those watching about how you manage that giant responsibility of your network and your customers and the technology and all the things that go into it? Because it does sound like it can get really big really quickly. Pinky,
Sure.
why don't you go first?
I'll start. Yeah. Okay. So I think the 2 key things I'll say is, number one, leverage, right? And number two, as you said, technology and a CRM. I think those are probably the biggest ways to manage that. The tech is, you know, Armando said it, but having a CRM where you just make sure every person that you have goes into the CRM and is categorized, right? Are they a title agent? Are they an attorney? We're an attorney state, so we have attorneys here too. Are they, you know, are they the home inspector? What's their role? So everyone goes in and they're classified in the CRM accordingly. And then you can have different campaigns going out to them depending on their role. So that's number one. And then technology also in that CRM, we have milestone communications that go out depending on where we are. So there's a communication that goes out, hey, your loan is with processing right now. Congratulations. It goes out to all parties. If you label them properly in the CRM and then you've built the campaign right, then it'll just go out to them automated so that you don't have to do that every single time. So it manages that part of it. We do Tuesday update calls. The Tuesday update calls go to the buyer, the buyer's agent, and the listing agent. So, and then that's where the leverage comes in as well. I'm fortunate to have, you know, some help on my team here. So helping manage that, right? Because, you know, I wouldn't, if it was on me to put all those names in, it probably wouldn't happen. If I'm being honest, that is not my superpower. It's not my strength, that attention to detail. So they're putting everything in, making sure it gets in. So Tuesday, I call the agents because that's where I have the ability to build those relationships and bring in the business. They know the details of if, you know, homeowners insurance is needed or what bank statements they need. I'm not paying attention to that stuff. So they're calling the buyers. So leveraging a team to help you would be the other way if you have that ability. And if you don't initially, it's okay. You know, build those systems out and time blocks so that you can take care of what's important. And Jeremy, you said it before, there's like 1,000 things that we could be doing in this business. But understanding what is money making, what is your superpower, and what adds value, right? And then figuring out those things that you should be doing of everything is the important part. And then time blocking accordingly, which, you know, is a wonderful thing to say, but super hard to implement, right? I'm not, you know, naive to that fact. It's something that I continue to work on getting better and better at. So, but I do my best at it and keep working, you know, and you find the little ways to find leverage on yourself so that you do the things that you know you should be doing, because it's easy to spend time doing work saying that you're busy, but you're building out, you know, like a Canva template for something and trying to fix the font on a presentation when it really doesn't matter, when the content is more important, right? So it's easy to say that you're busy doing that work.
That exactly.
And it's not like I did that yesterday or anything. I'm just saying it's
right.
Armando, anything that you'd add to that?
Armando?
I leverage the CRM. Like I live in my CRM. My emails go out through there. Text messages go out through there so that everything is in there. And I just simplify it. I send one email a week to my real estate agent database, and I send one newsletter to my past clients and anyone who's come across our system as a lead that hasn't bought a home in the last 2 years. So that usually goes out to about 3,500 people. And then the email to real estate agents goes out once a week. And that goes out to about 6,800. And I track who opens. Anyone that's inactive, we remove them and try to increase the percentage of open and click rate. That helps.
Yeah.
So on the digital, you know, marketing side, I'd love to hear a little bit. We did have a question, what CRM do you utilize? So I would love to hear from both of you. And then get into kind of, you guys are both really great on social media. I love your content. It's very much directed towards that first-time home buyer for the most part, super educational and I think very engaging. So I would love to hear from each of you what your strategy is around that and maybe how that's evolving as well. So whoever wants to start, Armando, do you want to start?
Sure. From a CRM, I use a system called Follow Up Boss that was made for real estate agents. I got on it as a lender for one of the agents that we work with, and I liked it. And we've been on it since 2013. There's probably much better ones if you're only doing mortgages, but it's kind of one of those things where we've been on it for so long that that's what we use. So that was the CRM question. And what was your other question, Kristen?
The other one is just that
social media?
how are you leveraging social media? I'd love for people to hear a little bit of practical advice around building your brand as, you know, educational, reaching first-time home buyers through social media.
Yeah, I think with social media, one of the things that a lot of people in our industry miss is we've been taught to always like sell, right? You always have a call to action, you see all the cute things always be closing and all that stuff. But if you think of the average person, like when you're consuming content, you don't want to be sold. Like we literally pay extra so that we don't have to watch commercials on Hulu, right? So if your content appears to be a commercial, people are going to scroll past you. And one of the really crazy things that I realized with social media is if you notice, there's people that you follow whose content you never see, right? But when you go to their profile, there might be 5 or 6 posts that you missed entirely. And the reason why that happens is the platform, if I skip through someone's content 3 or 4 times, the platform thinks Armando doesn't like Kristen's content, so I'm not going to show it to him anymore. And we we mute people kind of by accident. So what I try to do is make it so that people always want to see what I'm posting. And it's a hit and miss. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I try to just give value so that people keep coming back to it. And then I'm very subtle with the calls to action, mostly on the stories. And that's worked out well.
Yeah, I love
I hope
it.
that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Pinky, what's your thought process around your social content branding?
So I think that probably the number one thing I have to say about that is be authentically you, is what I'm going to say. And it dovetails a little bit about what Armando said about people don't want to be sold to, but people also want to know who you are. So if I showed up, hopefully if you go to see anything on my Instagram, you'll see that I speak in probably a similar way to how I'm speaking right now, because this is who I am. So you'll get to know who I am through it. And I think that's, and I do highly recommend videos, by the way, because again, if you were to scroll through my Instagram, even now I still try to throw in just an image or something like that. And if you look at the counts on it, the videos just are, we're in a world where people have super short attention spans. And they don't want to have to read anything. They just want to watch it and listen to it, right? So I think that video, if you're not doing that, I know it can be scary. It's not comfortable, but just think of it as if you're speaking to one person, that one client who you can think of that you just thought of that want to convey that message to, that first-time home buyer who you spoke with and who was not sure, didn't know that they needed 20, they thought they needed 20% down and they weren't going to buy a house, right? So if you're doing a video about that, think of that person in mind and how you could simply explain it to them. So that's what I would encourage, but don't think about, oh my gosh, it's going out and thousands of people are going to see this, right? So I would say that would be some advice that I would have on that. And then the other thing is, yeah, it's about adding value. When you focus on who's on the other side of that camera and you focus on making sure when you're doing it for the benefit of that person and not because you want more business, you will be able to think about your content from a perspective of, is this helpful to somebody? And when I focus on that, it becomes easier for me. I don't worry that my hair looks funny that day or that I've got a big zit or that I look, I don't worry about those things as much when I'm focused on the other people. I'm not saying I don't ever worry about it, but it does, but it's made it easier for me to get over myself, I'm going to say, because there's so many limitations. There's so many ugly things that we say to ourselves and stories in our head when we put out videos. So just remembering why you're doing this and that it's for the benefit of educating other people, then it makes it not salesy. It makes it valuable. People want to pay attention. They don't want to just keep scrolling. And it becomes more powerful content. And then focus, and I appreciate, Kristen, what you said about how our content is largely focused on first-time home buyer, because that is a mistake that I made early on, is not having pillars that I wanted to put out there. So identifying what pillars you have in your business of what you want your brand to be. So because before I just would throw out whatever was in my head at that moment, right? All of a sudden I heard about a new DSCR loan. So I wanted to talk about that, right? But that's not what my first-time home buyers need. So should I be talking about that if that's what I want or not? So really thinking about what your pillars are and how you want to be seen as a brand is also really important. So my pillars are education, family, community, and I say mortgage, but specific first-time home buyer, right? So if you look through my feed, you should see and health and fitness is like my personal part, right? Of like, if you want to get to know me. So that's what you'll probably see throughout my feed and in my stories are things related to that. And then you will get to know me through that. And so people will get to know who I am. And I love social media for that reason, because look, if those things don't resonate with you, don't bother calling me, right? Like, we don't have to talk, and let's not waste each other's time. Let me talk to the people who want me, who want what I have to offer, and who want and like what they see in those videos, and who, you know, if they feel connected to me through it, then pick up the phone and call me or whatever and communicate with me. But if you're not, just keep scrolling and let me focus my energy on the people who care.
I love
Yeah,
that.
it's that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's that combination of saying like, hey, I do this because I care authentically about my customers and my audience, but then also there's an efficiency play too. And I think a lot of people don't talk about both simultaneously. And it's really nice to hear like, look, yeah, this has authentic value of who I am and what I'm trying to do, but also it's good for my business to just self-select. So I'm not wasting my time, and you can have both of those and be really effective. Sorry, Kristen,
Yeah.
what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, I love the way that you're talking about that in terms of especially getting over yourself. Like whenever I am going on stage or I'm doing a video or whatever, if I think about the value that I'm bringing, or, you know, the end result as like having an impact on someone, even if it's just like imagining there's one person that's going to find this really valuable, you know, and thinking about the impact side of it, then it makes it so much easier. I'm not worried about like how I look or all these different things that we get stuck in our heads about. And I love the incorporation of not just education, which you guys do such a great job of doing, but also the personal side. And Armando, I saw a post that you did, something about incorporating, you know, your jujitsu teacher had taught you. And I feel like even little things, subtle things like that of saying, here's what I learned from someone, this is a piece of me. It makes me personally attached to what you're teaching, you know? So anyway, that's all I wanted to chime in about.
And Kristen, can I just add one more thing based on what you said? You said that if one person gets it, that's actually my motto when I do my videos, is that I have to impact one person with this video that I do. And same thing right here, for me to show up here, hopefully somebody on this call, one person is getting value out of something that I've said here. So therefore it makes this time worthwhile, and it makes it not about me, right? It's about you. And so if I can impact one person with being here right now, with every video that I do, then I feel like the time is worthwhile, and that I need to, and that gives me the motivation to keep going, by the way, right? Because it's not easy to keep developing content. But knowing that I've impacted one person gives me the motivation that I need to keep going as well. So if that also helps.
That's so good.
Yeah, that's great.
Can we
I love
ask?
that thing. Please.
For the people that are here, can we ask, like, is this valuable to you? Can you just let us know in the chat if you're finding value from spending your Tuesday morning here with us?
And we'd love to hear
Anyone?
what is valuable around what we've talked about today as well. So I know I found it all very valuable. And sorry, go ahead, Jeremy.
No, I was going to say I'm looking forward to seeing what comes through. While we're waiting, one of the things that I'm super curious about, Armando, is if you've seen any trends or you've gleaned any insights recently from the questions you get from consumers, from your first-time homebuyer customers. Do those questions come in, you know, direct message, text, phone call? I'm curious how they come in, but I'm actually more curious what they're asking. What are some of the insights, you know, right now in the market that you're hearing from your potential customers or your existing customers? Are there trends? Is it, you know, to each their own, or are there things you're gleaning that seem to be true across your market?
I think one of the things that is kind of a hurdle for most of us right now in the business is there's so much negativity in the media. There was an article that was published maybe 2 weeks ago that told people it's cheaper to buy a home than it is to rent a home. And if you look at it on the surface, that's the case, right? Your rent might be $3,000 where your mortgage might be $5,000. But once you start to look at it like in the long term, where the landlord continues to raise the rent, and when you're paying that $5,000 mortgage, you're paying down principal, and now you're gaining equity, and then you have the tax deductions. I think it's really important for us to be advisors today and really break down those numbers, because people are only looking at the surface, and the media is against us most of the time. So those are the types of questions that I'm getting. I had a client this morning who wrote an offer over the weekend, and this morning sent me a text saying, do you really think it's a good idea to buy a home? Like, yes, right? So I think once we show them those numbers, it helps, but we do have a little bit of an uphill battle constantly, right? Because the media seems to always be against it. And I think it was Barry Habib this morning who said, if we complained about stocks going up the way we complain about values of real estate going up, it would be crazy. But when the stock prices go up, we're all excited about it, and we just don't tend to have that same attitude when we see home prices going up, right? So I think it's important for us to really understand how to explain that value to the consumer. And that's something that I'm doing a lot of these days. And the mortgage coach definitely helps.
Yeah, I feel like I was extremely anxious about buying a home, and I was asking those questions too, even though I had worked in this industry for so long. But when it came time for me to make that jump, I think there's so many voices we're hearing from the media that, like you said, Jeremy, it's super negative, and so you just want to hear, like, are you sure this is a good idea? Like, can I trust you? You know, and that's where all of the things you guys have been talking about is, it's about building trust and showing that, hey, I am going to guide you through this process. We are going to make smart decisions together. So everything from social media to events to your process using Mortgage Coach and First Home IQ, all of those things are building that brand that makes the consumer feel safe. So thank you guys so much for being here and sharing your advice with us. And I know that's brought so much value to our audience, and we'll share this with those who weren't able to attend live. Any last words from either of you that you'd like to share in bringing inspiration around reaching millennials or first-time homebuyers?
I thank
Sure.
you for all the comments, by the way, in the chat, for those of you that did. That was really nice to hear. So appreciate that, about the impact and different things. And so my last words would probably be, I said be authentically you, but I can't say that enough, because I really, really made that mistake before for too long in my career, because I would see what Armando was doing and I was like, that's great, I'm going to try and copy Armando, right? But I tried to copy Armando, and Armando, that's not how I was. And so, yes, I can learn lessons from Armando, but then I have to execute them in the Pinky way, right? And I think that's the important thing, is to take lessons from what you're hearing, but implement them in a way that's true to who you are. And if you're not sure if you're willing to, like, think about why you're doing this and what you want out of your career here. I think that's the other piece of it. Sometimes we go through the motion and say we do it. If we're just doing it for the money, it's hard to get motivated to do the right things, because we may think that that's enough of a drive, but it typically isn't. So think about why you're really doing what you're doing and what you want out of it. Because when we all our time on this earth is limited. And when that time comes, when we're no longer here, is that what you once said at your funeral, that, hey, Armando and Pinky was a fabulous loan officer? No, that's not what I once said, right? I know that, but if someone says, wow, Pinky really helped change a lot of lives, well, then I get really thrilled. And so that's what drives me, is knowing that I can make an impact in people's lives. So whatever it is for you, it doesn't have to be that, but just think about whatever it is. And I would say focus on that, and then the right actions come, right? Focusing on that first mindset, then you do the things that you need to do to go help people.
So yeah. Good. Armando, any last words from you?
I would say just try to reach as many people as possible, right? The bigger the net we send out, the better. But always meet people where they are, because I think that's one of the struggles that I had before, is I expected people to do what I wanted them to do without really giving them the context, right? So if you go to a doctor doesn't just prescribe pills to you just because you walked in the door. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges in our industry. People walk into an open house and there's a realtor who wants to offer them a program, but they may not know if it's the right program. So I always try to ask a bunch of questions before I prescribe a program. And I think that really helps it, because it helps you with the process, because you're giving somebody something tailored to them rather than just throwing out whatever first program is there. I guess that's what I would say.
Huge. Yeah, thanks. That's a great ad. And Jeremy, thank you for being the guest co-host today. Any last thoughts from you?
Wonderful to be here. Thank you. It's a pleasure to talk to both of you, because that authenticity that you talk about, and Armando, your strategy definitely comes through for both of you. I think the one thing that popped into my mind, Kristen, was when I talk to big companies, they often talk about lifetime value of the client, and they use it as a way to measure investment and measure a product roadmap. And I don't think enough companies ask, what's my lifetime value to the customer, right? And what I heard today from Pinky and Armando is that's exactly what they're asking themselves. What is my lifetime value to them, not their lifetime value to me? And that subtle shift makes a big difference. I think comes through in your social media, it comes through in your interactions, and it comes through in that network you build of referral sources and the way you deliver that valuable intel. So for me, it's just been a pleasure to hear that, because that's really inspiring.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you guys again. And thanks to our sponsor, Form Free. Definitely check them out, formfree.com. You can download their apps. But super appreciative of them and everybody here in the chat for being here and participating. Would love to continue to hear your thoughts and questions so we can continue to bring value through Mortgages with Millennials. So Armando, Pinky, thank you again for being here. And thanks everybody for a great show.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you.